everyone. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you, Paul?
Doing great. Glad to have you here. Let me just move this screen here. This will be a bit better. All right. So we got a few people on the call already, but usually takes a little bit for people to join here. So I'm sure there will be a few more joining here soon. 30 seconds, there'll be a notification that goes to everybody to let them know that we're live. So maybe let's just give that a second here. How are things in Australia?
It's good. It's been a bit of a warm last few days, but yeah, overall good. How about you? How are things over there?
The opposite. Quite cold. So that's the way it works, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we might as well get started. I know a notice just went out to everyone, so there might be a few others joining here, but yeah, it's just a very informal discussion on commissioning and our new standard that's been released. So welcome everyone. My name is Paul Turner, and we have Manoj from Australia, our Australia East local chapter lead. We're going to have a discussion about the release of the ICA Global Commissioning Standard and how it can help everyone on projects. So welcome. Do you want to introduce yourself, Manoj?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Manoj. I've been in Australia now for about 10 years. In total, I've worked in project engineering and commissioning for about 20 years now. And it's in various industries, wood treatment, textiles, pharmaceuticals, and renewable energy. And right now I'm in logistics, automated logistics warehouses.
So you've got some very good commissioning experience that you bring to the table here.
Yeah. What was interesting was all along, I think all of us know, like, commissioning was never really treated as a mainstream activity in the past, and I've always felt, that as well. Like, yes, commissioning I always thought was very important, but never really saw it as a thing because nobody saw it as a thing. And when I was studying recently, I found commissioning association, and I got excited. I'm like, yes, it's actually becoming a thing now. And a lot of things that I read in your articles actually were quite true, like how commissioning should start from the beginning of a project instead of the tail end of it. But yeah.
And that's one of the driving reasons that we've written the ICA Global Commissioning Standard, because some of the standards that are out there are a bit outdated or legacy, where they don't necessarily talk about the full commissioning process. If you've ever gone and looked for some of the existing standards like API 1FSC, it'll talk about completions and commissioning, the on-site testing portion, but it's completely silent on any of the early commissioning activities that take place during FEED, during concept stage, or during early commissioning engineering phases. So the Global Commissioning Standard from the Industrial Commissioning Association is really the first document that actually defines what takes place during early commissioning. So we're hoping it's a good tool for people to use on their projects. Manoj, have you had a chance to download and check it out? I know you were reviewing some of it as well, but now that the final version is out?
Yes, I've downloaded it, and I'm actually setting up sessions to share it with my colleagues as well, project team, so we can run through it and hopefully integrate it into our processes. That's the key thing, right? Enforcement. So that's where it is. So I think an interesting one that I've, not just me, I think a lot of people were wondering, like, is like, what was the main driving factor for you to actually bring together all these standards. And even more interesting is compared to a lot of other standards out there, it's available for free. So yeah.
Yeah, commissioning is definitely not a well understood discipline on projects, but it's absolutely fundamental to project completion. I think in the information age that we're in, particularly the age of AI, information is, I don't want to say undervalued, but it's almost becoming a commodity, right? If you can get access to information with so much ease, then we wanted to make this access as easy as possible. Because the commissioning industry doesn't, or the construction industry doesn't really understand commissioning all that well, we want to get this information in as many hands of people as possible. And putting a fee on the standard is just that much more of a barrier for people to get this information, right? So we want to make it free. We want to make it easy to access. We want to be able to get it in everyone's hands. And your approach, Manoj, is absolutely what we want, right? Is take the information and then share it, show it with others, help them understand commissioning. Use this as a tool to spread the commissioning message on projects, and hopefully not only just the commissioning community can understand this commissioning process a bit better, but also everyone else, the project managers, construction groups, engineering groups. We want to help everyone on projects understand the value of commissioning and the importance that commissioning, the process must take place on projects. So that's why the information is free. That's why we want to make it easy to access for people to get their hands on this valuable information.
Nice.
One thing,
a lot of newcomers, people have joined now, so it's great.
That's the thing. Yeah, one thing we've found is that there's lots of wise commissioning experts in the industry, and they may be mentoring one or two junior members on their project, but we've got this incredible tool in the internet to share information, right? And if we could help one or two people, why don't we try and help thousands of people? And this is our way of giving back to the community and documenting the commissioning knowledge of the world in a set of standards here that people can use on their projects. So let me ask you a question. One of the comments I've been getting in just recently in the release of this standard is, well, this doesn't align with what I understand for commissioning, or this doesn't align with the terminology that I use, or this doesn't align with the phases of commissioning. And I think that's been one of the issues, is there's been no standardized process, right? So how do you see this standard being used to help standardize projects, and maybe how do you see this standard being used on your projects to help you with commissioning?
Right. So yeah, you're right in terms of that. There hasn't actually been any form of formal or informal standards to create a guideline like, okay, this is phase one, what's phase two, what is pre-commissioning, what's commissioning. Everyone doesn't really speak about pre-commissioning, right? But having said that, also a lot of projects are quite different. They're quite they run very differently because they may have different equipment. So a standard like this has, like when I was looking at it or trying to apply it to our projects, the standard covers everything. It's great. Now we choose what fits our industry or what fits our project. So there might be phases that don't apply to it and some that apply to it, but it's a start to standardize. And it's normal when a lot of people see something different and they think they need to change. There's a lot of pain and confusion. It creates a lot of confusion, but it's a matter of sitting down and creating a map of what, or like for terminology, what we would normally use versus what's in the standard, and trying to link it. And once that's set up, it'll start to flow. Basically, we just have to start with the standard, put it into practice, and see how it goes.
Yeah, you're right, because projects are, they definitely have specialized testing processes, but the overall commissioning process, like the risk standards-based approach to commissioning. It's the same for all projects. I know some people always say that you can't standardize commissioning, but commissioning is really the process to manage the transition from construction, area-based construction to systems-based completion. And that process is the same for all projects, which is what's defined in this standard.
Correct. So while they might be different, they're not unique. So if you have that particular system, the process would be the same, right?
Yep. Even when you consider projects, like projects are largely made of the same types of equipment, right? We've got pipes, pumps, motors, valves, breakers, transformers that are on pretty much every project. They're just in a different arrangement, different configuration, right? So the process to commission a group of that stuff is the same. It's just in a different configuration. So you've got a different checklist and a different procedure, but the process, the governing umbrella process of the commissioning process is the same on all projects.
Right.
So from your experience, why do you think the commissioning industry needs this new standard? What was the driving reason for you to reach out and get in touch with this standard?
Well, at least from what I see at the moment where I am, I think there's a lot of noise with commissioning and a lot of afterthought put into it, and I see how it hurts projects. Not just here, from past experiences as well, and I was always thinking there has to be a way to integrate commissioning from the start. And when I started looking at what you were saying and the standards, I was like, yeah, this is exactly what it is, right? Apart from that, I think commissioning is also becoming a lot more complex. So it's no more just mechanical and electrical. You've got mechanical, electrical, control, safety, and software, right? So looking at your standards, it's an umbrella that covers the whole start to finish now. So yeah, some projects may not have software, but some will have software, and anyone can use these standards, to apply to any of these projects. So that's where I got really interested and wanted to be part of this.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. Is that projects are getting more complex. Everything's interconnected. Everything's PLC based. Everything's remote operated, and with the complexity of today's projects, you definitely need a precise process to follow to make all that work in the end. Otherwise, you just got a heaping pile of equipment and nothing's working, right?
Yes, correct. And to add to that, one thing that was always overlooked was integration. Yes, we commission machine A and machine B, but you don't necessarily integrate them until it's too late or towards the end. And this is where it's captured in the standards.
Yep. Another important aspect of the standard that's been put out is digitalization of the process, right? For that exact reason, because projects are so complex, there's just so much information and so many details to keep track of. And the standard was written with that in mind. When you understand this commissioning process, then the next steps is obviously to digitalize that process. And we'll probably have some guides coming out shortly on how to do that digitalization of this process. What's been your experience on projects with regards to digitalization?
So just to understand the meaning of digitalization, is it the use of like CMS software? Is that what you're referring to here? My experience, none. It's always been the standard Excel, Microsoft tools. And yes, it might be applicable to small scale projects, but when the scale grows, complexity grows, it's just difficult to keep track of where and who has all the sheets. I have also found through the Industrial Commissioning Association, started to use, or I've just introduced it to the company, one of the CMS software. So we're actually starting to look into it, and it's interesting. It's like even those not in commissioning, when they saw it, they're like, "Oh, I've been looking for something like this." and this is and you found it. So it's definitely an asset that we need to consider, especially when we're commissioning large scale projects.
Absolutely. Another important, well, to close out that topic there, the digitalization is particularly important for the commissioning process, because we get all this great information out of design, from 3D models, from the CAD systems, tag lists, data sheets, all this information. And without a robust commissioning process, then all of that information is pretty much lost. Commissioning essentially is your digital thread to connect all the engineering data to your asset management systems. And it's pretty difficult to get all that information correctly if you're using spreadsheets. When you're using a proper CMS software, then that is your digital thread to connect all phases of the project, so that we can set operators up for success using high quality data from the project. Besides all the benefits of having high quality data during the project to make high quality decisions, it's Excel maybe worked 40 years ago, but it just doesn't cut it anymore, does it?
No, and especially with the need of real-time reporting and tracking, it's very difficult to do that with Excel.
Yep. Another important aspect we'll probably be putting some guidance out in the next little while is on the contractual implementation of the commissioning process. So I see this being a discussion at the beginning of projects, and it's often, oh, maybe we can get everybody to go on mute. I hear some pretty loud background noise there. If you're not on mute, can you please just go on mute? Yeah, with regards to the contractual implementation, I see projects sometimes at the beginning, it's too easy to just say, well, we'll give commissioning to an existing contract or the construction group or the design group without too much thought, right? But setting projects up properly contractually right from the beginning is probably the make or break decision for the success of commissioning later. So the standard provides some guidance on proper implementation of the contractual implementation of the commissioning process, but we'll probably be putting out some more guidance on contractual implementation, given it's such a critical, important aspect of setting commissioning up for success.
That's true. Another item that, at least from my experience in the past, that's also been a separate task to commissioning is FAT. And I like how the standards have actually integrated the whole FAT process into the commissioning umbrella. So yeah, I don't know what your experience is all with FATs in the past. Were they also considered as a commissioning process, or it's a sub process?
It often gets forgotten about or left to the procurement groups, right? And when some of those upfront systems aren't tested properly, then everybody wants to just kick the can down the road and defer that to site, right? Why spend the time? Why spend the money? Commissioning guys will deal with that later, right? But with an upfront focus on offsite testing, factory acceptance testing, and particularly integrated factory acceptance testing, then those are some of your best risk mitigation strategies to prevent issues later on site. So that's a big part of the standard as it's written, to define all the processes right from the beginning for a strategy for your commissioning execution plan and all your offsite testing to minimize risk on projects. So I'm glad you caught that and pointed that out.
Yeah. So with I see people joining every day more and more. What's the best way for people to get involved with the Industrial Commissioning Association?
So there definitely seems to be quite a lot of interest. We've got just crossing over 3,000 members, and there's like 20, 30 people joining each day, as particularly this week as we put out the standard. So it's definitely a growing community. So anybody that wants to join, a great place to go is icxa.net. And you'll see a big button right at the top of the screen there where you can click join. That gets you access to the standard, that gets you access to the community, that gets you access to all the document templates you need to implement the standard. It's essentially a commissioning kit, everything you need for successful commissioning. All the information is in there. So definitely check that out and get involved in the community, join a meetup like this, join a discussion group. Everybody's welcome to join and learn more about commissioning. So what's the next steps or how do you see that people can use this standard as a tool on their projects, Manoj? What would you recommend to people that are getting access to this standard? How can they use it to benefit their projects?
I think the best way to do it is to jump right in, have a look at the standards, have a look at the processes that are already being used in the company, line them up, see where you can improve your processes, where you may have gaps. But basically, my advice, like what I'm trying to do, is just jump straight into it. Bring in your colleagues, bring in your friends, managers, project managers, anyone involved in projects, procurement, even the design team, and start looking through the standards, because standards kind of cover every step of a project. So it would apply to a very, very vast group of people. So jump right in. That's it.
Yep, and share the information. The more people that understand, like you said, design groups, construction groups, the more people that understand commissioning, the better, for sure.
And most importantly, the integrator, the system integrator associated with the contract.
Absolutely, yeah. Critically important. A lot of the times those groups aren't involved till later in their project, but the earlier you can get them involved, the better.
Yeah, I think good afternoon, everyone. So I think that one of the best things that these standards is a backup to our careers. So the next step is to enforce or let change the approach that the project management and development management do with the projects. So they have to engage us at the beginning since the design, and we have to work together with the project manager. So we need to be above the construction manager, because construction manager is an obstacle to us.
And that's what we're relying on the commissioning community here for, right? We've got this great tool as a standard. Let's take this information and get it in the hands of other people and spread the knowledge, spread the information so everybody can understand this.
And Paul,
right. I think
I also would like to add on this context. Actually, what the gentleman said on the pre-commissioning side, while also on-site testing, like the on-site commissioning. Often do we see in a projects, for an organization, if a contractor, design builder is hired, they have system integrator, they come on later on, or from the user side, they don't participate on time while doing the on-site testing or on-site commissioning. So this sort of gap we see mostly in the even in the governmental job that I had. I worked with a couple of MTA projects that I see, had taken a lot of time with the system integrator to be adapt with the system, also with the user group, getting system turnover and the final acceptance, because they have on the FAT they have one team, SAT they have another team, and system integration testing they have another team. So while we are doing giving the final product to the owner, so it's been a very struggle throughout the entire phase of the projects. So it has to be done thoroughly from the beginning of the project, start to finish, all around the time.
It's a common challenge on all projects, isn't it? And that's the reason for this tool now, is a communication tool to help some of those decision makers see and understand what commissioning really is and how it actually saves them money rather than trying to defer it till later in the project. So definitely use the standard as a tool to to help in your discussions, to help other people on projects see the value.
Correct. I think that the more it's spread and the more people understand what the standards are saying, I think the more it'll eventually become that commissioning is actually a very important process, and it should start from the start of a project, not just an afterthought towards the end. But yeah, the only way that we can make the change is to actually have everyone or spread the information of what commissioning actually is about.
That's right. And we've tried to make the standard as brief and concise as possible to make it easy for people to understand. We didn't want to provide thousands of pages of information because nobody is going to read it. So it's very concise, to the point, and anybody, project managers, anybody that wouldn't be familiar with commissioning can pick it up and see the process and understand the risk proactive approach to managing commissioning. So another thing we did in the standard was we, in the terminology document in 002, there's a few, I'd say, legacy or outdated terms that we've essentially retired or are not used in the standard. There's some terms that have been used for decades and they've been ingrained in the industry, but I've found that they've led more to confusion than actually help people on projects. So the first one that's retired is mechanical completion. That one's a pretty common term, but it's not necessarily encompassing of all the disciplines that are actually part of that completion, right? It's not just mechanical, there's electrical, there's automation systems, there's instrumentation systems. So it'll take time, but going forward, that's probably a term we should migrate to in the industry for construction complete instead of just mechanical complete. So maybe that's a minor change, or maybe that's upsetting to some people because they really like the term mechanical completion, but that's what we can migrate to over time and standardize on that sort of terminology. Another one that's caused a lot of confusion is the term pre-commissioning. You ask 10 people what pre-commissioning means, and everybody will have a different definition. If that's construction activities just prior to construction complete, or is it just after construction complete? Who's doing what, and what is that actual division line? So we've eliminated the term pre-commissioning and instead made a very clear definition on that construction complete milestone and what would typically take place before and after from a standardized process. So hopefully that helps as well. So maybe we can open it up to any other questions. If people have questions, you can shoot them in the chat or come off mute and ask any questions about the standard, about commissioning in general, and we'll help you out.
Thanks, Paul, for this effort. I know that we appreciate this.
Yes, happy to help, happy to give back to the community, and looking forward to everyone's project success.
All right. Let's put these tools at work right away.
Absolutely. They're there. They're ready to go. I'll start applying them to your projects this afternoon.
Do you have some like a brief or something that resumes everything on the standard? So it's like something like to share with somebody else that is not a lot, doesn't have the knowledge of commissioning?
We do have some videos that kind of are like a 20-minute intro to commissioning, thinking that those would be very helpful. But you're right, some more maybe shorter context documents to help people understand and see the value of the standard. That's probably a good idea too. Yep. Exactly.
Something like resuming 2-3 pages only. It's something like, what is the benefit? Why this is happening, and how any industry can be benefit from.
Yep, that's a great idea. Open to those types of ideas, and anybody that wants to write something like that, absolutely welcome to contribute, and we can share that with the group. So I see a question on, is there anything like agile delivery in commissioning? I've seen that question before is how Agile and Scrum, and does this apply to commissioning? And I'll say it doesn't at all. It adds more confusion. The only approach for commissioning is a systems-based approach. When you're making that transition from area-based construction to systems-based completion, that's really the only standardized process or best practices to manage commissioning is with a systems-based approach. Anytime Agile or Scrum might apply to some design activities or construction activities, but it's definitely a change of mindset when you get towards commissioning and taking that systems-based approach. So I would definitely encourage you to follow the process that's outlined in the standard. That's the typical best practices in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about anybody else on the line, if you've heard or tried or seen people trying to apply Scrum and Agile and how that worked out on projects. Daniel,
Daniel has a question.
Hey, Paul. My main question is, in your opinion, what is the best way to negotiate with construction? What I mean is, in our environment, we working by systematization, and construction work is by construction package. So in the beginning, I had to deal and negotiate with the construction manager to give me a preference. For give you an example, the electrical construction package. Okay, I say, my friend, I need you give me some preference for my control room. So let me know if we can deal with partial mechanical completion, and I can start working in the commissioning of my control room. So that is tough. So what is your opinion, the best way to interconnecting construction package with systematization for commissioning?
The best way to do that is in contracts written before construction is even engaged, because there really should be no negotiation. If the standard as it's outlined is followed, all of that is defined in your project commissioning plan and your DOR matrix that is fed into your EPC contracts before construction contracts are even awarded. That's the only fail-proof way to do that and have that smooth transition from construction to commissioning. Because once contracts are signed, then it turns into that negotiation exactly as you describe it, right? And it's not in the contract, then it's not necessarily going to happen. And it does become a negotiation. And because of the incentives that are in contracts, contractors are always going to be incentivized or aligned to their incentives in the contracts, which is optimizing time and optimizing money, not necessarily handing over to commissioning in the sequence that aligns with your startup sequence. So the best way to do that is to start very early in projects as the standard defines. So all of that is defined in contracts in how the project is systemized and the sequence of system handovers required for commissioning. Now, I will also say that that's probably rare on projects that actually happens. It's often the case that commissioning folks are brought in much later and negotiating with construction groups after contracts have already been signed, right? So again, still start those discussions earlier so that construction groups have enough time to plan their completions based on systems-based completions. That's the best way, is start early.
Thank you.
Any advice from anyone else on the line when you've had those discussions with construction groups on best practices to align construction and commissioning?
Well,
Oh, I have another extra question regarding that.
Sure.
For the pipes, in my concept is, if you build and you weld, you test it, not me. So what I mean is, commissioning responsibility is not for hydro test or X-rays. That is mandatory for on construction side. I'm right or wrong?
Yeah, that's from the installer. But you have to require on the contract.
Correct. It needs to be specified from the start what's expected out of the supplier. So it needs to be put down in black and white, or all these negotiations should be done very early. So there's no gray area, no area for discussion, negotiation further down.
Yeah, just trying to clarify, as you say, black and white about responsibilities, because we cannot deal in about it in front of the client. We have to define that, and also the leak test. From my side in commissioning, I have not any problem or issue participating on that. But as I mentioned before, if you weld it and you build it, you have to test it. And in my site, I have to compile all the inspection test records and ensure everything is according to the standards.
Yeah. Yeah, I concur with you, Danny. Anyway, I just creating like a commissioning book, or let's say handbook for the company. So everybody, that is gonna be part of the specification that is going to each of the contractor. So they have to align with it. I included also some QC electrical, mechanical checkups to be happening. So that's rely on the contract, as you said, it does rely on the installer. So each installer is responsible for their own work.
Any other questions or comments? Anyone that wants to come off mute and ask a question, or if there's any other questions, shoot them in the chat and we'll get your questions answered. Anything on, particularly on the standard, if you haven't got a copy of it yet, how to get a copy. If you have any questions for anyone on the line, let's get your questions answered.
All right.
For anyone that doesn't have a copy of the standard yet, you're already logged into the members area. If you're on this call, then when the call ends at the top there, you click on resources. It'll take you to the home page and you'll see the link there where you can click on the standard. And there's 9 parts to the standard. You can download each of the 9 parts. Each is a PDF. Download those, save them on your desktop, and you've got them for reference. You can use them on your projects. And by all means, share the standard with anyone else on your project, help them understand commissioning, talk to them about it, explain how the standard works, and definitely join any of these meetups coming up in the future. So a thought I had was, because there's 9 parts to the standard, I'd like to start a series, maybe starting next week, where we take 1 or 2 of the standards and go through it in a bit more detail, just to help everybody understand the contents of the standard, the intention, how to use it, how to apply it on your project. So if you think that's helpful, I'll set that up in the next little while, that you'll get an alert similar to this, and we can jump on the line and we'll walk through maybe 2 of the documents on the call here, go through the general framework of the phases and handover model, and then answer anybody's questions that come up. So what's the attempt to measure actual system performance against design requirements, as this always cause conflict with the project consultants? So that would be during the performance verification phase of projects. So once everything's started up with process fluids or full electrical loads, then performance verification is verifying against the original design requirements. Enrique or Manoj, I don't know if you have any other comments or experience that you want to share on performance verification. I'm not sure about specific to conflict with project consultants, but if you have anything to add, by all means.
What's the attempt to measure actual system performance against design requirement? I mean, just talking from a logistics industry, we the only way we can do this is to actually have everything up and running, and we do a performance test or an endurance test. But again, I guess the requirements are important. They need to be specified from the start before the project, kicks off, and it needs to be clear and also achievable. So, yeah, at least from my experience, when we need to we need to measure actual system performance. We go by the requirements may stipulate, okay, this piece of equipment can only have a maximum of 3 errors in so many hours, and each error you should get the machine up and running within 1 minute. So if that's the requirements, it's something that we need to test too. So yeah, at least that's from my experience.
And if that's well defined early in projects, then hopefully there's no conflicts with project consultants, because commissioning is really the tool to ensure that the owner is getting what they paid for, right? So if there's requirements, just like Manoj was saying, then you certainly want to verify those during performance verification at the end of the project there to make sure that the project is meeting its original intended outcome. That's really the primary function of commissioning here. So there shouldn't be any conflict with consultants, because if that was well defined at the beginning, then it's going to meet requirements or it's not. And if it's not, then there's more work to do to bring systems in line so they're functioning correctly and actually generating the intended outcome as was originally defined at the beginning of projects.
Correct, because sometimes customers might not know the details of what they actually want. They just want a system that works. They might not be able to specify the requirements in detail, rates, downtime and such, and sometimes consultants may not be either. So this is, from our experience, at least something that we would need to work with the customers at an early stage. So based on the system that they want, we come back and say, okay, this is the rates that come through. Are you happy with this? So once everything is specified, then we can go to all the vendors, all the suppliers, and say, okay, your machines must do this. And the commissioning team also has something to work to. Okay, we need to make sure the rates are this at the end of the day. So basically, it all boils down to having it specified very early in the project.
Yeah, and the other thing is that when you have the designer, when he select the equipment or select several equipment to assembly one system, he already knows what is the performance is about. So he stated the outcome. So there is several few things that you have to test, meaning the performance of each individual equipment or device that is there that constitutes the system, and the end you have to test the control narrative in order to see if it's achievable, the outcome that is expected from that system.
Yeah, that's very true. Another factor here is, yes, let's say you have 2 or 3 machines, and the designer has selected it to the output or performance that's required. This is where the commissioning team comes in to identify any bottlenecks, because machine A and machine B may be able to achieve the performance rate, but when you integrate the two, there might be a bottleneck. Mm-hmm. So all this needs to be looked at the early stages as well, just to make sure, like, okay, machine A's output is 5 per minute, machine B is 5 per minute, no problem. But the conveying system may only do 3 per minute. And this is not something that doesn't happen. It happens. It gets missed, and only when you're commissioning you realize, like, oh, no one looked at this piece of machinery to identify that the whole chain can meet the throughput. So it's something to keep in mind.
Mm-hmm.
In my experience, I have working for 35 years in oil and gas, and all the time I have to take a look in the contract, looking for the design. Based on that, it's not exactly a standard, but it's almost the same in every project. What I mean is the performance acceptance test criteria have to be defined about the 72 hours continuous operation until 110% of the capacity. Make samples every 4 hours and get the records on the trends. The tricky part is in the last line of the performance acceptance test agreement, because that's the client will be a witness. But the main tricky question is what is going on when the 72 hours is done? Do you want to keep running the facility, or do you want to shut down this and keep under nitrogen or things like that? So this kind of definition we have to develop with the project management. And that's from my experience. That is the tricky one. Because other than that, we evaluate cause and effect and factory acceptance test, site acceptance test before conducting the performance acceptance test.
And that's been the tricky part for sure, right? When writing contracts, there's been no reference to have in writing those contracts. So everybody writes contract and it all ends up different, right? So that's why every project has a slightly different commissioning process, because people have been forced to make it up because there's been no standard, there's been no reference. And we see different terminology in contracts, we see different process, we see different handover from construction completion to commissioning, or we see just no definition at all in contracts, right? So at least now there's a standard, there's a reference. People can use this as a tool when writing contracts to align on terminology, align on the process, the stages, the handover methodology, the transition from construction to from area-based construction to systems-based completion. It's all outlined in the standard, right? So use this as a tool when writing your contracts, and eventually, fingers crossed, maybe we can migrate to a more standardized approach in what's written in contracts. So it makes it a lot easier for people moving from one project to the next to understand this standardized or common approach to commissioning. All right, maybe we've got a few more minutes here. If there's one more question or comments or anything that anyone wants to bring up before we conclude today, let me know if you've got anything you want to ask, and we'll get your question answered. Cool. Well, looks like we're all in good shape then. Lots of thumbs up, lots of clapping in the chat there. So yeah, if you haven't already, go get your copy of the standard and maybe watch your email. We'll send out another series of meetups like this, so we can dive into the standard in a little bit more detail and help everybody understand it. So appreciate everyone showing up. Appreciate Manoj and Enrique for fielding some of the questions here, and lots of great questions, and hope to see everyone again.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having this session.
Thank you, Paul.
Yep,
Thanks,
everyone.
All right.
Have a great day.
Yeah, likewise. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.